Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there. Good morning, everybody. I get to do my Tom Harwood impression today. This is, of course, The Briefing. Don't worry, Tom's not gone missing. We'll hear from him later in the day. But, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everybody. It is, of course, 9:30. This is indeed The Briefing. It is me, Patrick Christie's, and I am live on your TV and radio. I'll be bringing you all the very latest from Westminster. This is called The Briefing. We will make sure you are fully briefed. But first, it's your morning's news.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. NATO's Secretary-General says the decision to make Sweden and Finland members of the military alliance will happen at an unprecedented pace. Well, the British Prime Minister is in Madrid now for the NATO summit. He says this is a huge step forward.
Vladimir Putin was hoping that he would be getting less NATO on his western front as a result of his unprovoked illegal invasion of Ukraine. He's been proved completely wrong. He's getting more NATO. This is a historic summit in many ways, but we've already got two new members coming in, Finland and Sweden. A huge step forward for our alliance.
The head of Bowel Cancer UK has told us Dame Deborah Jones was an inspiration who leaves a phenomenal legacy after turning her cancer diagnosis into a force for good. The podcaster, known as Bowel Babe, died yesterday, aged 40, 5.5 years after being diagnosed with incurable bowel cancer. Ukraine's president has released CCTV footage of the moment a shopping centre in the central city of Kremenchuk was hit by a Russian missile strike on Monday. Volodymyr Zelensky says the attack, which killed at least 18 people, was deliberate. A former White House aide has testified that Donald Trump tried to grab the steering wheel of his presidential limo when he was told he wouldn't be taken to Capitol Hill during the January the 6th riots. Cassidy Hutchinson also said that Mr. Trump knew some of those who gathered were armed, but asked security to stop screening people so the crowd would look bigger. Shop prices here in the UK have risen by over 3% in the last year. That's the fastest rate of inflation in 14 years. The price of food went up by just over 5.5% in the same period, driven by high fertiliser and animal feed costs. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to The Briefing this morning with Patrick.
Good morning, everybody. It's 9:30, and this means it's briefing time with me, Patrick Christie's, on your TV, radio, and, of course, online. Now, world leaders have arrived in Madrid for the NATO summit, where the ongoing war in Ukraine is the top of the agenda. The Prime Minister will use the summit to call for member states to increase their contribution to NATO, with Boris calling for more military spending. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, joins us live from Madrid. Thank you very much for joining us. Darren, last time I spoke to you, you were in Rwanda. Now you're in Madrid. Where next? But what's the latest from Madrid, please, Darren?
I'll be next to you in the studio if you're not careful,
Hey.
Patrick. As you say, though, NATO leaders... don't wish too much. As you say, though, NATO leaders are here in Madrid. Pretty crucial NATO summit, maybe the most crucial one we've seen in decades, given the raging war in Ukraine and the escalation, frankly, we've seen this week with that missile strike on a shopping mall. And where we're going to see, though, I think we're going to see, obviously, extra commitment to Ukraine, possibility of yet more weapons. There's been talk from the United States as well to try and prevent the Russians from being able to build up their munitions by trying to impose further sanctions. We know NATO are also going to increase their kind of rapid-fire forces from 30,000 to 400,000, so quite a big dramatic increase, of which Britain's contribution almost certainly will go from the low hundreds, or sorry, the high hundreds as they've got at the moment, probably into thousands. And at the same time, we have the news overnight that President Erdogan of Turkey had essentially lifted his blockade on Finland and Sweden from joining NATO, so that process will now go ahead. Pretty momentous, isn't it, that NATO's expanding, particularly for two countries that have had decades of neutrality. But I think the big thing today actually is going to be on defence spending, not least of all because Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister you saw in the news, is here, and he's trying to urge those NATO members to spend even more money, put their hands deeper into their pockets, and to increase defence spending, to act as a deterrent and to increase their defence capabilities. But it comes as there's a row back home about how much Britain is spending on defence. Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, did a speech yesterday. He's been doing TV interviews this morning, which he's made it clear that he thinks and wants the Defence Forces to get more money. It's not entirely sure, though, whether the Treasury is going to allow that. And there are suggestions that Britain actually might see a fall in defence spending later on this Parliament. Again, not a good look for a Prime Minister who insists that defence is now key to the national imperative and is urging other countries to do otherwise. So that's one of the things. I've got an interview with the Prime Minister later. I will be pushing him on, but it's clear that there is a bit of a row, frankly, between the Ministry of Defence and Downing Street on this issue.
No, absolutely. Darren, sorry, I thought you were about to get hit by a bus then at the end there, but Darren McCaffrey there, live from Madrid. Thank you very, very much. Honestly, that really scared me. Sorry, mate. But yes, good. Darren McCaffrey, who's very much still alive in Madrid. But I'm delighted now to be joined by Dr. Anna Matvieva, who is visiting senior research fellow at King's College London, member of the university's Russia and Eurasia Security Research Group, and author of Through Times of Trouble: Conflict in southeastern Ukraine explained from within. Thank you very, very much. Look, today we've seen really, really harrowing imagery, haven't we, of what looks like a massive missile thundering into that shopping centre. Some 1,000 people supposedly were in there at the time. Casualties still rising, the death toll still rising. What's it going to take to stop Putin?
More territorial conquest and some kind of peace offering from the Western powers.
So do a deal.
So yes, some kind of a deal, because now, of course, we have seen momentous developments in NATO headquarters, but it is something which is going to make a difference in medium term. Immediately now, the clock is ticking. The Russian forces are advancing. Really painfully, but still now Russian forces control more or less 25% of territory of Ukraine and on the...
So sorry to interrupt, just we're a bit pressed for time, but so there you go. So there's that amount of territory that's already under Vladimir Putin's control. You can forgive Zelensky, surely, if you're thinking, well, if I do a deal with him, he just won't stop.
Well, I think that the only thing which can stop the fighting immediately now is some kind of a deal. I think we are very far from the deal because Western politicians are quite determined to support Zelensky, and Zelensky still has his country behind him to continue fighting. So we will be looking at more atrocities, more loss of human lives, and from the Russian side, they need to push forward very fast now before heavier and more sophisticated weapons are delivered to Ukraine. So for them, it is now or never.
Very quickly as well, when it comes to NATO, obviously, Is this going to be a provocation for Putin if NATO decides to step in a bit and, arm Ukraine as well? We've already seen, obviously, it's about to potentially get EU membership, and we've got, Finland and Sweden, for example, joining NATO. What's the chance that Putin might go nuclear?
I don't think so, because now they are believing that they are kind of winning on the ground, that the infantry forces are making good advances, and nuclear is a desperate weapon. And I don't think personally that it was ever seriously considered. Now this would be to Russian disadvantage to even threaten nuclear weapons. So I don't think that we are in any immediate danger.
All right, look, thank you very, very much, and thank you for being so succinct as well. It's a fast-paced show, this, so we really appreciate that. Anna McViva there, of course, visiting Senior Research Fellow at King's College London, and basically an expert in Ukraine and Russia. Right, so we're going to show some images now of various different leaders arriving here at this NATO summit in Madrid. And yes, there we are. So obviously what they're going to try to do at the very top of the agenda is to make sure that they have a discussion about Ukraine. And it'll be interesting to see what they do, won't it? But I believe that we are going to discuss this further now with political commentator and author and obviously expert, really, I suppose, when it comes to Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Paul Connew, thank you very, very much for coming on, Paul. What does a good result for Boris... Good morning. What does a good result for Boris Johnson look like at today's PMQs?
Well, at PMQs, of course, it's going to be Angela Rayner versus Dominic Raab, which could be quite interesting. She'll be very feisty. Dominic Raab may break the Boris Johnson rule by answering questions rather than shouting out pre-rehearsed slogans.
I mean, I hope Angela Rayner doesn't put him off too much,
But I think it's going to be... I think there will be some questions about the apparent split or difference of opinion, although being denied this morning, but not very convincingly, between Ben Wallace and the Prime Minister on defence spending. And let's not forget that most internal polls suggest that with the Tory grassroots and among a growing number of Tory backbench MPs, Ben Wallace is now ahead of Liz Truss as the favoured Boris successor. What worries me a bit is I think that, like the G7, this NATO summit, which is probably the biggest and most important NATO summit since the end of the Cold War, it'll end with declarations of unity, etc. But behind the scenes, there are still going to be differences over financial commitment by different countries. I mean, Britain is one of the better on this, although not to the level I think that Ben Wallace is now arguing in light of the Ukraine war. And we have the Prime Minister, who seems to be, and the Treasury, who are somewhat resistant to a substantial hike in defence spending. But Angela Rayner's almost got an embarrassment of riches to pluck from the cost of living crisis ongoing. And I think there'll be a few personal digs at Boris in absentia there. Not least, I think I'll be surprised if Angela Rayner, or at least somebody from the opposition benches, doesn't raise things like the Boris treehouse, the man who is the Prime Minister who is arguing against...
Is there anything wrong with that?
Is
there anything wrong with that? I mean, Boris Johnson gets criticised for not being a particularly good father in the past, and now he wants to build his current son a treehouse, and that's bad as well. It's almost like the man can't win, isn't it?
Well, no, come on, Patrick. There's a difference. The sense of entitlement factor was writ large there. The Times broke the story that Boris tried to get a Tory donor crony to cough up £150,000 for a treehouse for his son. When you're advocating pay curbs, for workers, that is arrogance and a sense of entitlement gone berserk. And the Times yesterday had a follow-up little item in the diary, which I found very funny, that his hero Winston Churchill also wanted a tree house on his private estate for his children, but he actually built it DIY.
Yes, slightly different characters.
Tory donors to cup up 150 grand.
No, slightly different characters. I'll take that one on the chin. But is there an argument, right, that Boris Johnson shouldn't be at this NATO summit? He's done enough for Kiev. He's done enough for Ukraine. He could have sent someone on his behalf. He's got to win back trust and support here. And he could have done that in the dispatch box today.
That's a good question, although I think it will be difficult to say, well, the Prime Minister shouldn't have been at the G7, shouldn't have been at the Commonwealth Conference, shouldn't have been at the NATO summit, although it's highly dangerous when you have raging inflation and so many domestic crises on hand, not least about his own leadership. So it was a gamble either way for the Prime Minister, but I think he, for once, and I know Boris Johnson's supporter, as you well know, but for once, I think he was between the devil and the deep blue sea, or a rock and a hard place. If he'd pulled out, it would have. Yeah, it would have brought a lot of pressure and criticism of him, and by staying, he's also getting criticism. But I think on balance, he couldn't really pull out.
Now, I'd like to go up north now to Scotland, if that's all right. And we've got the front of the eye here, which we can all see there. If you're listening on radio, I'll tell you, Sturgeon's new bid to split from the UK. I actually apparently made it now onto the front of the Daily Star, but that's a very different story and one for post-Watershed. But there we go. But in terms of Scottish independence, I think a lot of people are wondering whether or not this referendum's legal. I mean, it brings back memories of the Catalan independence referendum, where essentially the Spanish police moved in and pulled old people out of polling booths by their hair. I mean, I imagine we're not going to get that. But Scotland's First Minister announces plan to hold second independence referendum on the 19th of October 2023. Can we just say no to that?
We can say no to it, but it's quite a clever ploy by Sturgeon. I mean, I'm not a supporter of Scottish independence, but the Scots should decide that, not me. And I do have some sympathy, with her position in the sense that, yes, there was this allegedly once-in-a-generation referendum in 2014. But if you remember, Patrick, the then leaders of the Conservative Party, the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, the opposition leaders from the Lib Dems and the Labour all went to Scotland and declared that, in fact, the best way for Scotland to stay in the EU was to vote to remain in the UK. And as we well know, Scotland voted strongly to remain in the EU, but was taken out against its will. So, to that extent, I have some sympathy.
Can we not vote? Can we not vote on whether or not? Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry. It's just we're pressed for time. It's all good stuff there. But could we not get a vote? So, as by that I mean English people and Northern Irish and the Welsh as well. Could we not have a say on whether or not we lose Scotland? Do we not deserve it?
That's a novel idea. But I think for the moment, in fact, what's going to happen? We know that Nicola Sturgeon has written tactically to Boris Johnson, knowing full well he is going to say no to the referendum. She's also already made a request to the Supreme Court, who I think are highly unlikely to agree that the Scottish Parliament, have the right to, the Scottish Government have the right to hold this referendum. But what she's then planning, of course, is a one-issue general election whenever it happens next year, 2024, building on, if you like, the idea that England has blocked the Scots having the chance to vote in the current circumstances, and also capitalising if Boris Johnson, and it's a big if, were still to be leading the Conservative Party into that general election. As we all know, Boris is even more toxic in Scotland than he is in England at the moment, with polls regularly showing well over 80% despise him and have no confidence in him.
OK, good stuff. Well, look, thank you very, very much for joining me. Really enjoyed that. That's Paul Connew there, of course, a fan favourite here on GB News. Right, OK, so at midday today, as we were discussing there a little bit, the Deputy PM, Dominic Raab, will face Angela Rayner at the dispatch box for the first time, for the first Prime Minister's questions since last week's by-election. So with that new date, the 19th of October 2023, proposed as well by Nicola Sturgeon for a second referendum on British partition, the loss of Wakefield and Tiverton, and both NATO and G7 summits. There is a lot to get stuck into. It's an action-packed briefing for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Joining me now, we've got about 7 or 8 minutes left on this show. We'll try and squeeze as much into this as we possibly can. It's political commentator Dr. John Coulter. Thank you very, very much for joining me. Right, OK, you're Angela Rayner, you're at the dispatch box, you're staring Dominic Raab in his rather wide eyes. Where do you start?
OK, the one thing you've got to do, apart from saying good morning, Patrick, is to make sure that the Prime Minister's question times don't descend into some kind of schoolboy burping competition to see who can make the most noise. I think the biggest thing that the Tory party can really emphasise is Boris's role at NATO. From the point of view, I think he has now taken over from Emmanuel Macron as the top negotiator to get the fighting stopped in Ukraine. So I think this is a very, very good move by Boris Johnson. So I know there's a lot of questions that have to be asked here domestically, but I think the big thing is this, that Boris is now front and centre when it comes to the European diplomatic scene. And I think he must make the most of that. Set aside the by-election defeats. Set aside Partygate, set aside all the problems that he has within the Conservative Party. He now has a wonderful opportunity in Madrid to really establish and firmly copper fasten his leadership. Because what he can do here is scare the living daylights out of what we would call the Red Button Brigade in the Kremlin from that point of view. In other words, he could create a situation where Putin's generals say, look, we got to get out of Ukraine. And I think that this is the first step towards it.
Yeah, I am wondering as well whether or not, you know, Boris Johnson is, look, he's a bit of a greased pig, isn't he? He can just get away with everything, you know? And I mean, they tried to bring him down on various different things, personal scandals, etc. I mean, the treehouse stuff, I kind of let the guy from the Sunday Mirror get away with it a little bit there because, you know, conflating that with the cost of living crisis, I can understand why he would make that point, but it's not really the same thing. I'm just thinking, you know, actually what he does best is almost operate on the world stage from where I'm sitting. It's that Tory line, I get the big calls right. And actually, for my opinion, he does. So the fact that he's at the G7 now, I mean, you look around and you think, actually, as far as world leaders go, Boris Johnson isn't that bad, is he?
Yes, he's top of the heap. I mean, let's take a look.
So why would we get rid of him? Sorry, carry on.
And you can't deny that. He was really pushing to get a peace deal in Ukraine. But Macron has suffered a huge bloody nose in the French Assembly election. And as for sleepy Joe Biden, well, let's not go there. He has got so many domestic problems with the gun laws and with the abortion setting over there that he might as well move off the international stage from that point of view. So that leaves, in terms of global politics, Western democracies, the hot seat is now available for Boris to take. If he takes that, he can also do a double whammy. Not only does he become the big shot in global politics, but he also tidies up any rebellions at home. In other words, he ensures, say, for example, within his own party, that it is the ERG that runs the Tory party and not the rebels from the 1922 backbench.
Yeah, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but actually, in a way, it could be quite a good thing for Boris Johnson that he's not there, actually, because, look, the Wakefield and Tiverton by-elections, that's undoubtedly going to be brought up. I mean, it'd be madness if it wasn't brought up, and they did get a bit of a kicking, to say the least. But actually, he's not going to be the one there now justifying it, is he? It's a Mr. Raab.
No, I mean, from that point of view, Mr. Raab can take all the heat. Also, as well, if Labour was going to win back, let's face the reality, they would have comfortably taken both by-elections. They didn't. They only got one by a squeak.
Yes, that's true.
From that point of view, Starmer is a lame duck leader. So if Boris had been in the House of Commons, it would have given Starmer a lift up, and he doesn't want to do that. Starmer is his own worst enemy.
OK, I believe that we're going to, stay where you are, though. I believe that we're going to bring up some pictures of, there we go, those are leaders. Is it family photos? Is that what we're looking at? No, I think it's just world leaders, isn't it? Or maybe it is. Well, they've all got a very beige family, but anyway, there we go. There's family photos there, I believe. I'm being told that, but it doesn't look like there's any family there. But anyway, there we go. As world leaders, I think, we've got Biden, we've got Boris, we've got Erdogan, who's interestingly, I believe, they're stood next to Boris, which is an odd juxtaposition. Viktor Orban is looming over Boris Johnson from behind, for want of a better phrase. Everyone's there. There we go. Joe Biden staring blankly in the wrong direction, naturally. But just stay with... I will go back now. I've had enough of that. Let's go back now, and we're just going to ask you a final question, if that's all right. That is, of course, the NATO summit. What are you expecting to come out of this NATO summit, John?
I would expect much more weapons to go to Ukraine. I would expect more unity within the NATO countries, and I would expect them to put more pressure on the generals in the Kremlin to speak to Putin, because it's the old thing, cut the head of the snake and the snake is useless. So from that point of view, the more that NATO can ratchet up the language, the more that they can ratchet up military support for the Ukrainians, the bigger the pressure on Putin from his own generals.
OK, good stuff. Look, I've enjoyed that, Dr. John. Thank you very, very much. Political commentator, regular here, part of the GBNews family, it's fair to say. Dr. John Coulter, thank you very, very much for that. Now, I'm going to hot-foot it over to the other side of the studio very, very shortly. And we've got loads to come up, of course. Very, very sad news about the inspirational Sun columnist and presenter as well, of course, Dame Deborah James, sadly died of bowel cancer, I believe 5.5 years after first diagnosed, and she's raised millions and millions for charity. I mean, bless her, we'll be discussing that a little bit. And, of course, Ghislaine Maxwell sentenced to 20 years. We're going to give you the latest on that. We've got a bit on Nicola Sturgeon and the Independent. And, as well, what I'm hoping is we're going to talk about the Daily Star's headline, which just says, squeaky bum time. We'll fill you in on that a little bit later on. It's to the point very, very shortly with me. I'm Mercy Murky, but first, it's your latest weather. Stay tuned.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Another day of dodging the downpours. Heavy showers in places today, but not everywhere catching them. We should see some sunny spells. The winds are a bit lighter today, but it's still low pressure that's dominating our weather. This weather front has been bringing some persistent rain overnight across the Midlands. It's trickling its way eastwards and kind of fizzling out, but a damp start across parts of the southeast, northeast England and northeast Scotland from that weather front. And then we watch the showers break out, some heavy ones, the possibility of thunderstorms, and they'll be quite slow moving too. Overall, though, a much brighter day across southwest Scotland compared to Tuesday. And in the sunny spells across the east of England, temperatures could easily creep up into the low 20s, 23, 24 Celsius, whereas further west we're looking at high teens, low 20s at best. Those slow-moving, heavy showers will keep going well into the evening, mostly over northern England, the Midlands, but also southwest England and South Wales too. And then we're looking at more showers coming up from the south as we go through the night. Some clear spells, and temperatures will drop down to single figures, perhaps in some rural areas, but most towns and cities holding up in the mid-teens. And then Thursday, it's another day of watching the showers break out. For quite a few, it will be a dry, fine, sunny start, certainly across much of the Midlands, northeast England, but some showers quickly developing and pushing north across Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then look at that, developing fairly widely across England and Wales. So they will be hit and miss, but where they do occur, some torrential downpours are possible, particularly South Wales, southwest England in the afternoon, but also northern England and southern Scotland. Temperatures again highest in the east, low 20s. Generally, we're looking at high teens elsewhere. The outlook is for more showers on Friday, but signs of things doing a little drier across the south into the weekend, and with a bit more sunshine by Sunday. Temperatures also just starting to tick up a little bit. Bye for now.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel, And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity